Good afternoon. Why, thank you for the group in front that said good afternoon back to me. We're thrilled to have everyone here looking out and seeing that so many folks are here on the last day of the conference is great to see. So starting out the conference on Monday, I know that my mind has really been reeling, thinking about the message that we really kicked this conference off with. How change happens. Thinking about some of the comments of Leslie Crutchfield. Thinking about our field and how it is that we're going to move upstream and create the types of change that we need to create the conditions and context for children and families. And then thinking yesterday about Dr. Pradeep Gidwani and Carla Saunders and Casey Keene, and really thinking about their message about what are sort of those key ingredients of change. And I think it resonated with some of Leslie's presentation as well, and that's really the power of relationships. And I think all of you who work with kids, work with families, work in communities understand this notion that we need to spend the time building the relationships with families, building the relationships across organizations to create the kind of change that we need. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to sit in on a session with the Doris Duke Fellows, the National Conference of State Legislatures, Child Welfare Policy Fellows, and our chapter executive directors to talk about this issue of how is it that we start having conversations with researchers, with policymakers, and those people who are doing the statewide prevention work. And what was interesting that came out of that session was also this issue of the power of relationships, that we need to be building relationships across research to practice, research to policy, but also in the other direction. And so these were some of the themes that resonated with me, but I also go back to some of the comments that we heard on the first day from our new president and CEO, Dr. Melissa Merrick, which is prevention happens in partnership. And that's what we hope that everyone can take away from today, is that prevention is going to happen when we can reach across our organizations, when we can think about building the relationships that we need, because no one organization, agency, model is going to do this alone. Again, I get the fortunate opportunity to do some light housekeeping for today. A couple things we want people to be aware of. At the registration booth, we have a video, an opportunity for you to shoot a video up there. It's sitting right next to the registration booth. And what we're asking people is to go to the laptop that's sitting there, hit the space bar, and tell us what the phrase moving upstream means to you. We're trying to catalog this idea and help us think about some of our work that we do at Prevent Child Abuse America. As well, there's still a few slots available to attend our mobile session, Evicted, happening this afternoon. Last night as a staff, we got to go to the mobile session Evicted as a staff, where we learned about the issue of housing insecurity here in the Milwaukee area. It's a book written by Matthew Desmond. If you're interested in attending the session, please go to our registration booth and sign up. The session will be this afternoon, and so you still have time if you're interested. Please remember to complete the conference evaluations in the conference app. I know some people have been having difficulty with the app filling out evaluations or finding their schedule. If you're having difficulty with the app, we ask you to just close out the app and reopen it. That's been working for most people. And speaking of the app, we want to do a little competition again, like we've done the last couple of days. So, the first person to get onto the conference app and post on the message board with the phrase, and I'm gonna switch it up on you today, with the phrase "prevention happens in partnership," will win a $20 Starbucks gift card. And we will announce the winner at the end of our session today. So now we have a special guest joining us to do a welcome today, and that's Mr. Keith Stanley. Keith Stanley is the executive director of Near West Side Partners Incorporated, where he's charged with spearheading the organization's efforts to revitalize Milwaukee's Near West Side. Since the organization's formal launch in 2015, Stanley has played a critical role in the success of numerous achievements for the Near West Side. Stanley is also executive director of the Avenues West Association and the newly expanded Near West Side Bid Number 10. Previously, he served as the program manager of the Sohi Main Street program and as chief of staff to then Common Council President Willie Hines. Stanley holds a bachelor's degree in business administration from Alabama State University, and he was also named as a Milwaukee Business Journal 40 Under 40 winner in 2016. As I shared with him briefly before coming up here, I said, after reading your bio, I realized that I need to go get to work and do something with my life. So with that, I would like to introduce Mr. Keith Stanley.
Thank you, Bart, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for the invite for this beautiful conference. How's everyone doing today? Come on, you could do better than that. Make some noise. Another quick question. Are you learning anything? Are you learning anything? I would assume you're learning what it means to move upstream. I would hope. My name is Keith Stanley. As Bart said, I'm the executive director of the Near West Side Partners. I've been in that position for the past 6 years. The Near West Side Partners is a community and economic development group here in the city of Milwaukee. We're sponsored by about 370 businesses in the Near West Side. Some of you are familiar with some of our businesses. Any Marquette University graduates here? Not that many there we go. We got a couple of Marquette University graduates. Anybody have ever been to the a hotel and casino for Potawatomi? They're one of our sponsors. How about Harley Davidson riders? Any Harley Davidson riders here? They're part of our sponsorship. And along with, of course, Miller Coors, and they're a great sponsor for the Near West Side. We focus on community and economic development within the Near West Side and focus on how we can make a healthier community. Many of the issues that we address, you guys, I'm sure you're familiar with, whether it's the fresh food deserts, whether it's health and safety of our residents and community. But ultimately, we are making sure that we have a quality of life issue addressed within the Near West Side. I heard that some of you went on the tour already for the Matthew Desmond expired exhibit, Evicted. I hope there was something, you learned something out of that too. I'm encouraging those to please join the tour. There's one more tour left, and I heard there were some seats left. Please join the tour. It's very inspiring, and you learn quite a bit from that exhibit. Just a quick story, and then I'm going to let you go and enjoy your food. Thinking about today's address, I thought about something that's near and dear to my heart. So some of you may have heard, 1990, 1991, my family was a part of the Two American Families documentary, a Frontline special with Bill Moyers that talked about the economic downturn of two American families, the Newmans and the Stanleys. It was an amazing opportunity to have your life flashed upon the screen for 25 years. The last installment was done in 2013, and it showed me with and without hair. But it also told the story that many of us have experienced and within our legacy cities across this country about the economic downturn, the pain and the struggle of being laid off from Briggs & Stratton, A.O. Smith, Tower Automotive, and my parents dealt with that. What was special about that for me as I thought about today's address was in 2013, I had the opportunity to address the U.S. Senate Democratic Convention. Before, I was the first speaker with the producers of the film, and then right after that, they rushed me out so President Obama could come and speak. I didn't get a chance to hear him speak. But they brought us in to tell our story about what it means to be a part of the middle class. The producers from Frontline Special invited me to come, and we spoke for just about 10 minutes to these different groups. It was Chuck Schumer and the rest of those folks in the crowd that I was just amazed to be a part of. But what threw me for a loop, and the first time I ever cried, I think, about this presentation was listening to the story of the other family. I had the privilege to be a part of a family that just either had strong bonds or had some luck, but our family stayed together. But the economic downturn, just like with the Newmans, has taken a toll on many of our families, I would say including mine. So there was drug abuse, addictions, unhealthy ways of living. And I thought about that theme, Bart, about this upstream idea, and that a lot of the things that you are doing in your day-to-day work, we could use that support because the economic downturns that we're all witnessing, despite what people are saying, is affecting our families, it's destroying our families. To have my mom and dad laid off from A.L. Smith and Briggs and Stratton, and then to one day be in private school and the next day be in public school, one day to be having a house to live in, the next day not to have a place to stay, it affects us. It affects then how the parents operate, how our families operate. It is a painful process that I imagine many of you can identify with. So I just encourage you as we work together on our many different fronts. I work on the community and economic development field, and many of you who work in the child care and prevention field, we have to work together. Our families are, I was gonna say under attack. No, our families are under siege. And our families have been under siege for over 25, 30 years. People say we have the highest employment rates ever. But where are our families working? Fast food, McDonald's, Walmart. My mom and dad worked really hard to make a life for us, but it was sacrifice. I learned unhealthy behaviors. My brothers and sisters learned unhealthy behaviors because we were just trying to survive. So I just encourage you as you begin to work with our families, understand that this is a whole process on both sides of the equation. The young kids and young families that you meet now, it's already determined because what they're dealing with is an economic reality that many of us can barely deal with. So I just encourage you to just keep doing what you're doing. Keep being involved, keep going to the conferences, keep learning, and keep working with our families, keep working with our communities in these cities across the country because we need you. We need you. We need you to be your best, your brightest, because we are struggling. Our young families, they don't have a clue sometimes on how to deal with not being able to pay rent, not being able to buy groceries. Yes, in this America. So I just encourage you to keep doing what you're doing. We need you. With that said, I'm gonna get away from that seriousness and ask you to please do attend the Evicted exhibit. It's important to us because as we see, as Matthew Desmond highlighted in his book, eviction is a big problem for us, and as he would say, it's becoming the problem when it comes to poverty in this country. And so please visit the tour, please enjoy yourself in the conference, and please enjoy my wonderful city, the city of Milwaukee. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. So now is the point in our program we get to turn and to highlight our new president and CEO of Prevent Child Abuse America, Dr. Melissa Merrick. Dr. Melissa Merrick recently became the president and CEO of Prevent Child Abuse America. Prior to joining PCA, she was a senior epidemiologist at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention National Center for Injury Prevention and Control, where she served on a detail in the Office of the Commissioner at the Children's Bureau and Office of the Administration for Children and Families. She has nearly 2 decades of clinical research and leadership experience related to etiology, course, and prevention of child abuse and neglect. Dr. Merrick has been involved in multiple projects examining safe, stable, and nurturing relationships and environments as they relate to child maltreatment prevention and the effects of adverse childhood experiences throughout the lifespan. In partnership with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Office of Child Abuse and Neglect, she served as the lead scientist for the Adverse Childhood Experiences, or ACEs study at the CDC. So today, Dr. Merrick is going to deliver a keynote address. Following her keynote address, we're thrilled to also be joined by Dr. Jerry Milner. Jerry Milner is the Associate Commissioner at the Children's Bureau. Jerry began his career as a case-carrying social worker, served as the State Child Welfare Agency Director in Alabama, and previously worked for the Children's Bureau's designing and implementing the CFSR. Immediately prior to his appointment, he served as the Vice President for Child Welfare Practice at the Center for the Support of Families. So Dr. Milner will be joining Dr. Merrick up for a fireside chat following her remarks, but please help me in welcoming Dr. Melissa Merrick.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is, this is really loud, right? Okay. It is just such a joy, the highlight of my professional career, to be here today with such a happy, healthy, motivated group of almost 1,000 of you. Record attendance. Just feel so privileged to be here with you. You know, to be fair, I agreed to do this keynote while I was still at CDC, way before I was the president and CEO of this great organization. So I think what you'll get here is a combination. It's really about vision, but it's not my vision or Jerry Milner's vision. It is the vision that we have to have for kids and families in our country, and I would argue around the globe. This moving upstream is not something like that we might do or could be nice to do. It's something we must do. And I really appreciate Keith Stanley's remarks. The Evicted exhibit, our whole staff went last night, very powerful. We are so fortunate to have the curator of that exhibit, Sarah Levin, here at this table. So afterwards, you all can learn more about it. If you haven't signed up, sign up. It's so powerful. Because I think what we're talking about, moving upstream, what does it mean? It means lots of things, right? It comes from this notion that there's a stream and people are dying, right, in this stream. And so what do? We try to send rafts, or we throw lifesavers into the stream. That might be secondary prevention, right? Or get them quickly out of the stream and take them to a hospital, tertiary prevention. But maybe we go at the top of the stream and figure out, why are people falling into the stream, right? What I like even better than that is Dr. Kamara Jones's The Cliff of Good Health. If you haven't heard Dr. Kamara Jones, formerly of the CDC, now at Morehouse in Atlanta, and she partnered with the Urban Institute to really visually present this in a really compelling way. But it's like if you're on this cliff and you fall off the cliff, well, you hope that there's an ambulance at the bottom of the cliff to take you for services, tertiary prevention. Maybe you can get it before they fall all the way off the cliff and you have a safety net or some kind of a net, okay? Secondary prevention, but nets have holes, and so you're not gonna be able to save everyone. So what do? We maybe wanna build a fence, not a wall, a fence, at the top of the cliff, okay? So you build a fence, primary prevention. Let's stop injuries and illnesses before they start in the first place. But it's even more complex than that. We have to remember that it's not like people get close to the cliff by accident. Some people are pushed to that cliff, right? They're pushed. And others are maybe more protected from the cliff. So until we have the work really focus on assuring the conditions for health and well-being, very complementary to what we're talking about, poverty, racism, other kinds of structural determinants of health, till we bulldoze these kinds of experiences, we acknowledge and address historical trauma, we're never gonna really get ahead, right? So this is similar to, I hope you've seen this graphic, the pair of ACEs. This is from Wendy Ellis and colleagues, building community resilience work. But you know, what we've done for the past more than 2 decades in ACEs is maybe we've measured these leaves, right? Child abuse and neglect, mental illness in the home, parental incarceration. But what we haven't required ourselves to do, and we must, is really get to the bottom. What are the roots? What are the root causes? You know, Kamara Jones also has this wonderful thing about the gardener's tale, and you can see 2 kinds of flowers, right? You see a red flower, so beautiful, a pink flower, but the red flower was new. She bought the best soil for the flower, the gardener did. She nurtured it, she, you know, took care of it, talked to the plant maybe, you know. The other one was just, she moved into this house and she kept the old soil, right? So year after year, season after season, one grows beautiful, lovely. The other one is like, kind of like, you know, a lame flower. So what happens? The gardener's like, well, it's right that I prefer this beautiful flower. It's beautiful, you know, it's gorgeous. And this one, poor flower, like, you know, shame on that flower, bad flower. That's what we do, right? But what can we do instead? We can get to the roots. We can address, we can nurture that soil, give it nutrients, give it love, give it access to all of the things. And then what happens? You see 2 beautiful flowers, right? So we must, in this next generation of this work, address these root causes. And this is not, again, my vision, your vision. It is the vision to require us to say, is it ACEs? Is it adverse childhood experiences per se? Or is it adverse childhood socioeconomic conditions that are growing these early adversities that we measure? So bringing a public health approach then, what is public health? I love this definition. I will continue to use it until I see one that's better. But public health is what we as a society do collectively. Not by ourselves, not one agency, not one department in an agency. What we do collectively to assure the conditions in which all people, not people that look like me, live in my town, go to my kids' school, all people can be healthy, okay? So then if that is the definition of public health, and we see that there are these root causes and conditions that produce the leaves that we're observing, ACEs, child abuse and neglect, other adversity, what is then the public health approach to CAN prevention, right, to child abuse and neglect prevention? So here you've probably seen a graphic like this on the public health approach. These are really the 4 steps. You describe a problem. You say, how big is the problem? You know, it needs to be a big problem to be a public health issue. You identify risk and protective factors. We know things make it more likely to observe that problem, and we know that things protect us from being able to observe that problem. We determine what works. We assure widespread adoption. This arrow down here at the bottom is my own, but I think it's also cyclical, right? It's iterative. It's not like we put one program out in the field and we never make adaptations, right? We have to lessons learned. We're continually learning, continuing growing, and doing our work better and differently and to serve everyone. So for child abuse and neglect, there are 3 criteria for any problem to make it qualify as a public health problem: the magnitude, the burden on the public's health. So some things can be really common, like the common cold, but they don't exact such a toll, a negative health effect on the public's health. And then you look at, are there prevention solutions? I'll tell you, big surprise, all 3 criteria are, of course, satisfied for child abuse and neglect. But here you can see 1 billion children, 1 billion children experience direct violence and victimization annually around the globe. That's half of all of our children, okay? People used to say all the time, like, oh, CDC does child abuse prevention or violence prevention in general, and we have a whole contingent of folks from CDC, and I hope you meet them and spend time with them. And we say, yes, it's a public health problem because it's a huge problem, right? And we know that it can exact a toll. And they said, no, like Ebola is a public health problem, right? Well, at the height of the Ebola outbreak, 11,500 people died in 1 year at the height of the outbreak. So of course we deployed all kinds of resources, importantly so, to save lives. Well, 11,500 kids die because of violence every week and a half around the globe. 11,500 kids die because of violence, direct violence, every week and a half. Okay, huge problem. But still, our dominant kind of, frame goes to images such as these, kind of broken bones and maybe bruises and these kinds of physical impacts. Never mind the decades of science that say that things like early adversity get under our skin. They change our brain, the way our brains develop, the way our brains grow, the way our immune systems function, endocrine systems function, even the way our genes express themselves over time, over generations, okay? But we go to the default schema, if you will, of these physical insults and impacts, which are important to prevent. But we don't always think about these images, things like decreased academic achievement. We don't think about leading causes of death, like cardiovascular disease, health conditions, physical health conditions like diabetes, stroke, asthma. But we know, again, through decades of research that no matter what health outcome of interest, really, if you have child abuse and neglect, you are more likely to insert health outcome here. And this is that early adversity has lasting impacts on our health and well-being. So it doesn't matter then if you're in the business of preventing mental health problems, if you're in the business of preventing STDs and STIs, if you have healthier kids, you will go on to have healthier adults. I mean, it's very simplistic, and obviously there's a whole complex science out there about it, but this is the bottom line. We want the healthiest kids possible. We know even that if we have healthy kids, communities can recover from a disaster quicker, right? So all the hurricanes that are coming through, a new one on the horizon, Hurricane Jerry. So it's not just Hurricane Jerry in child welfare raging his storm, it's also, but our kids, if we're healthier, if we're supported, our families are supported, we can go on to have healthier adults. You all know, and I would be remiss if I don't at least talk about ACEs a little bit, but I think you guys know all about ACEs. These are the original CDC, Kaiser Permanente ACEs here from 20 years ago. But I hope what you see here is that this is not the entire universe of early adversity that we know our kids are experiencing. So, for example, you don't see the boarding school experience on this graphic for all of our Native families and Native communities. You don't see what's happening at the border listed here, separating children from their caregivers, right? So we know that this is a limitation. This is but a sample of those leaves that we measure. But still, it's a very robust literature, and really it teaches us a lot of important things. This graphic, first of all, another shout out to, the ACE website at CDC has many useful graphics for free. Again, public health agency, public servants. So you can go, I just copied this off the website and put it in my own slide deck. That's what these resources are for. So to the extent that a lot of these CDC slides are helpful to you, you can download them. But this tells you what decades of research have shown. As you have more early adversity over there on the x-axis, on the horizontal, you are more likely to experience or have a higher risk of experiencing health impacts, health risk behaviors, and then this life potential. I want to talk about the life potential impacts for a moment. For decades, what we did is we have, replicated this finding for over 40 health outcomes. And when this study moved from the Center of Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion at CDC to the Injury Center to Violence Prevention, and I was the lead scientist, well, it came with no staff, it came with no resources, it came with no agenda. I said, well, I don't think it's novel or innovative to document the 41st health outcome, 42nd, 43rd. This is a robust literature. Let's be in the business of preventing these early adversities before they occur. So I would hear a lot, oh, Melissa, I get what you're presenting, but if people go to school, right, that's a buffer. That is a buffer. That makes quite a lot of assumptions, like we all have equal access to high quality, affordable early learning, early child care, college, postgraduate, right? It assumes a lot of things. So we just examined those outcomes. And we found that not only does early adversity impact our health outcomes, but they also impact our ability to graduate high school. It impacts, as your ACEs increase, you're more likely not to complete high school. You're more likely to be living in poverty as an adult, and to be unemployed. And so I just want you to hear me carefully. That does not mean that poor people have high ACEs, because that's what people always describe that finding as. No. The early adversity came first, and it sets our kids, our young people, on these trajectories. So we must prevent early adversity from happening if we are truly to take a primary prevention public health approach. Oh, I guess to feed up that next slide, I guess it's really, it's associated with leading causes of death. Oh, another point. It's not deterministic, right? It's not like you have these early adversities and doom and gloom. We all know those stories that people like to lift up about, I grew up like that and I'm fine, right? Because you have a lot of protective factors, okay? So let's get clear too what we're not saying. When we say something's not deterministic, we mean that the protective factors can outweigh risk factors. And I don't care if you use CDC protective factors, CSSP protective factors, someone else's protective factors. If you have good stuff, you can buffer risk, okay? But it doesn't mean that these people that, had early adversity that are great, right, and doing great things, did that on their own. They did not pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. They did not just, magically happen to be healthy and thriving, okay? So it's just to be clear about that. So we know that these early adverse experiences, though, are linked to leading causes of death and health impacts of the day, like the opioid crisis, right? You see this same kind of graded dose response impact on opioid misuse, okay, or on use of a prescription drug without a prescription. And so this slide, I pulled the Wisconsin data. Again, if you don't know about this, you can find this on you find it on the American Academy of Pediatrics website. They partnered with Casey Family Programs to really highlight data. These are data from 2016. The child maltreatment data for 2017 are out now, so maybe they've updated these, I don't know. But the point is, this is free resource. Again, you can plop in your state and you can get these data. What I like about these data, this is not really that compelling in a vacuum, but what I like about this is it contextualizes, like, yes, we know there is this great impact of child abuse and neglect, but we also know that substance use was a factor in 23% of these placements. To me, this gives us information about the conditions within which children are being raised. So when we talk about the dual generation impact, drug abuse, all the risk factors, we now are seeing that if we do not implement a public health approach, we just have another generation of this same problem. Again, exposure to parental substance use is an ACE, even by the old school ACE scale, right? So this is about the conditions, and again, what was public health? To assure the conditions in which all people can be healthy. This, also on the CDC website, I really like it. It took us many, many moons of advocating for this because many of you know this pyramid. People would say, well, why do ACEs lead to early death, right? And it used to stop at the ACEs level, but we worked hard, and there is science to ground these last two levels, right? Local conditions and social conditions, local context, and this historical trauma that's passed on across generations. So if you're wondering about, kind of the science and toxic stress, you should go to the Harvard Center of the Developing Child. They have a robust inventory of slides, graphics, other things that explain each of these layers. This slide I really love because it really, to me, puts it in context for us as a field. It's not just that early adversity like child abuse and neglect happens and sets our kids on a path toward ill health outcomes. It's that it also makes it more likely that they will experience other violence and victimization over the lifespan, and this then has a cumulative impact. Okay, so for example, Brown and colleagues in 1998, so way a long time ago, documented a 19-year difference in life expectancy between those who had high ACEs, measured 6 or more, versus those who had no ACEs. For those of you who don't know, 19-year differences in life expectancy is a greater life expectancy inequity than we see in most any other illness, injury, or geographic comparison, okay? That's almost 20 years of life loss. So as we think about newer partners like the business community and workforce and such, 20 less years of being a productive citizen. So along with healthy kids leading to healthy adults, healthy kids lead to a healthier workforce, right? So a healthier nation, a healthier country. Which is why the role of public health and violence prevention is on the left side of this graphic, okay? It's in primary prevention, stopping violence, early adversity, child abuse and neglect before it occurs, so that there are less children and families that touch these other systems, like criminal justice. Everybody's talking about the criminal justice reform and such on the debates. Okay, prevent childhood adversity, right? We can stem the flow of kids to that enter child welfare, social services, even healthcare. So again, like some of the PCA chapters that are partnering with insurance companies, or those of us partnering with Medicaid to prevent, for prevention services, this is cost effective. This is great. This helps us achieve multiple public health goals and outcomes if we have healthier kids. So the mission of PCA America, to prevent the abuse and neglect of our nation's children. I think to date, as an organization, we've focused on secondary and tertiary prevention, if that's fair. So I think that there is really a lot of opportunity to grow into the primary prevention space too. That's not to say that we don't need both. It's a both and. We need prevention across the continuum. We want to help kids and families that have already experienced child abuse and neglect too and mitigate those outcomes. But we must require a comprehensive approach, one that has primary, secondary, tertiary prevention activities and really works in partnership with all of you. Our vision for every child to have a great childhood. I have to say, for me, I need some explanation. What do we mean by great? Happy, healthy, fun? Yeah, we mean that, but we mean with food, with housing, with affordable, high-quality childcare, universal access to home visitation like Healthy Families America. We need all of those things to really ensure a great childhood and then a great future. Very complementary, of course, with other leading kind of visionary things out there. Essentials for Childhood, the vision for CDC's child abuse and neglect portfolio of work is really assuring safe, stable, nurturing relationships and environments for all children. Again, a mouthful, but many of us painstakingly chose each and every of these words. But they're all really important, right? I mean, you want these kinds of healthy relationships between parents and children, yes. Also between parents and other adults that can protect their children. Also between children and other adults that can sometimes buffer for the lack of those relationships in the home. And you want these kinds of environments, not just the home, the school, the community. Of course, you want those physical environments to be safe, stable, and nurturing. But you also want a safe, stable, nurturing socio-political environment. We know that there are some policies that support children and families and others that frankly just miss the mark. And we want this for all children. Again, health equity is the goal here. We want it for all children, not just some children and not others, not their children, but our children, right? But what we never want this message to convey is that we're trying to disappear the groups of kids that we know experience a disproportionate amount of the burden. Okay, so we have to be careful to message what we want and what we actually don't mean. And then this is really the shared vision. This was what I spent time with David and Jerry in DC and their fabulous team at the Children's Bureau to really create, along with all of our sort of sister agencies in health and human services. So that's the SAMHSAs and the Medicaids and the HRSAs, where we get our MCFI dollars and others, to really say, listen, we're all helping children and families. We're all doing important work, but we're actually talking many times about the same children and families. So why can't we embrace what we're trying to achieve together in partnership? Could we do that? We really rocked that process, David and Jerry. I think we got it right here, creating the conditions for strong, thriving families and communities where children are free from harm. Another mouthful, frankly, but again, so important, and really the conditions. Again, you have, safe, stable, nurturing relationships and environments for all children. That's about conditions. Here you have spelled out conditions. This is a public health approach, because what was public health again? Assuring the conditions where all people can be healthy and can thrive. Because, another thing, healthy kids lead to healthy communities. I mean, this can be bidirectional as well, right? Because healthy communities lead to healthy kids. So thank you again, all of you, for the work that you do. But again, in all of these, to really assure conditions, back to those graphics with the tree, it's kind of however you want to see it. I'm giving it to you, okay? The bottom layer of this pyramid calls for socioeconomic factors, okay? So for those of you who don't know, I'm trained as a child clinical psychologist. That's what my degree is in. So I'm very comfortable helping one family at a time at the top of this pyramid, and that work will always be important, always be critically important. But until we also have strategies and we prioritize strategies that change the context, change the conditions, okay? You think that families, well, you guys know, come on, I have so many of our HFA partners and affiliates and HFA family in the room, you know that the services that we provide clinically, there's no way that we can take those up if people are struggling to get to appointments, if people don't have access to health care and access to all the things, child care and other things, right? So in some ways, it's sort of like we can't even work at the top of the pyramid if we don't think about the conditions that exacerbate trauma and problems for our children and families. CDC has a whole suite of tools, again, and I don't know if you visited the CDC booth in the exhibit hall, but they have lots of these technical packages for child abuse and neglect. There is a Preventing Adverse Childhood Experiences document that's in clearance at CDC now that'll be coming and available on their website soon. And there's lots of essentials for childhood documents, so I encourage you to take those. But really, these are the 5 buckets of strategies, right, that I would say go from primary, secondary, and tertiary prevention to prevent child abuse and neglect, based on the best available evidence. I know there's a struggle in our field, evidence-based, evidence-informed, evidence whatever. I will say that we cannot wait for perfect evidence to act in the best interest of our children and families, right, to prevent child abuse and neglect. That said, we have data to support certain types of approaches. I would say that it was very tough to kind of prioritize the ones that got prioritized here, because when I started at CDC, we didn't even talk about policy, big P. We were like, oh, we're not allowed to do that and whatever. And thanks to a small but mighty child abuse and neglect SME, subject matter expert group, we really fought hard to get these policy level solutions prioritized and then norms level solutions. So again, requiring us to get to the bottom of that pyramid. So strengthening economic supports for families, the key bucket. And why? Because we're trying to reduce parental stress. Okay, number 1 or top 5 risk factor for child abuse and neglect perpetration, right? Because if you are struggling at that exhibit, let me tell you what I thought about that exhibit last night at Evicted. So compelling. You read, forget all of, there was so much in that exhibit. Please go to the exhibit. But I was just like, oh my goodness, like, could you imagine, and many of us can, could you imagine trying to do the best you can do, work 2 and 3 jobs. You have the pediatrician, telling you to read more to your kid. I don't know when in your day you have time to read more when you're working 3 jobs just to pay for food on the table. So then you blame yourself. Oh my gosh, I'm not a good mom because I'm not reading enough. And then you go home and your stuff is on the curb. And then maybe you take it out on your kid. Well, that is because that is an insurmountable amount of stress. We need to get in front of it. We need to help families, help support moms, help support dads. We need to prevent early adversity before it begins, not blame. We're really good in this country in that norms bucket, that bad mom did that thing, right? We got to take away her kids, right? Versus we all have a role to play in preventing early adversity for all children. And in fact, the science is also such that my children will actually do better if all children are doing better. Other tools on the website, veto violence, if you don't know, vetoviolence.cdc.gov, that's a more interactive website for government, by government standards. So you have some of the cooler resources there. There's a Preventing Adverse Childhood Experiences training. We got 2 of them out before I left CDC, one for psychologists and behavioral health practitioners in partnership with the American Psychological Association, and then one in partnership with the American Academy of Pediatrics. This was really for different disciplines to understand what their role was in primary prevention. Because again, from the physician standpoint, they're like, okay, screen and treat, right? Or refer to services. Okay, that's important too. That will always be important. But even in the 15-minute clinical encounter, there may be things that we can do to actually prevent child abuse and neglect. And one thing I will say that we can do is, everybody's on this ACE screening train. We don't even have time to talk about that today. I'm not on that train. So I just want to say, but if we understand parents' experiences of early adversity, that's when we can truly have primary prevention impact of the next generation, okay? So because, again, healthy kids lead to healthier parents later in their life, right? So again, prevention happens in partnership. This is obviously not work that one agency can do alone, even if it's these great agencies like the Children's Bureau, CDC, PCA America, but we can do it in partnership. We are required to do it in partnership, right? Because we know that if we do what we've always done, gonna have what we've always had. So key partners in this space, and it's all of you and your friends and your colleagues and everyone, right? So there's no kind of audience that I could think of. I mean, maybe there's one, but maybe there's no audience I could think of that we couldn't figure out a way to partner toward achieving this shared vision. Because again, this helps us achieve all of our nation's health and well-being and prosperity goals, right? So ultimately, prevention can only happen in partnership, and I'm so thankful to have a close partner in Jerry Milner for this work in the next generation of can prevention. The next generation of can prevention means so many things. I use this phrase a lot, and it means a lot of things. It means the next generation of our workforce. Absolutely, it means that. I think it's always about mentorship and bringing and teaching younger people than all of us or newer people to the field about why they must join us in primary prevention. But it's also about the next generation of ideas, being novel, being innovative. I know that our funding streams don't always make that clear how we're able to do that, but so the more of you that can be calling for these kinds of blended funding streams and expansion of home visitation and these kinds of services that we know are good for children and families, that's also what we mean. And I think it also means in this new role, the next generation of how PCA America partners with our robust state chapter network and Healthy Families America sites and affiliates, okay? This is a both and. This is not that the national office has all the answers and we're gonna tell you the answers. The answers that we know, we're gonna share, yeah, but you have answers that we need to know too. So it's a very bi-directional, it's very all of us in this together. So my commitment, I think you've heard a lot about vision, but my commitment to is to also lift all of the great work up and to call for more of it. It is also to expand what we mean by child abuse and neglect prevention in this country. It means a primary prevention public health approach. And it also means, the next generation of news outlets and media. So social media, we have an excellent, at the National Office, communication staff that put a call out on, I don't know if it was Twitter or Facebook or something that I don't have, but all of you sent in pictures of what you're doing in partnership, and here are just a few, just a flavor. I know some of you, when I call out some states and not others, I hear, Melissa, we're also doing that, and Melissa, well, good, tell me about it. I want to learn from you. I want to know what's working really well and what examples you have. But here is, in North Carolina, partnering with policymakers over paid parental leave, a key providing economic supports to families kind of effort. Here in PCA, Illinois, partnering with business, okay? Here it's a children's hospital. We have to think about newer partners in this space. We can't always work with people who just think just like us or already get it, right? We talk to them too, but we need to convince other people why they need to get it too and why they need to join us. And a business partner is a really strategic partner. They have a different kind of power, I would say, and lobbying power and resource power to call for prevention solutions. Partnering with media. This is something that this is a picture of PCA Arizona. I know there's a lot of people from Arizona here, but partnering with media is also very strategic. I invited John Schmidt is a local reporter here in Milwaukee who's published, I've gotten to know him over the years, when I was leading the ACEs portfolio. He's published a lot about ACEs in Milwaukee, what they look like. And I invited him here to join us in these days so he could see a little bit of a flavor of what we can actually do in prevention. What are the prevention solutions? I mean, it's good to raise awareness of a problem, but I want us to be in the next generation of this work, lifting up what is the prevention solution. And then here, partnering with youth-serving organizations. Okay, this is from PCA Nevada. And I just think, I love this picture. We deserve to be safe. This to me really reflects the joy, the great childhood, if you will, what we're all trying to achieve. Healthy children, okay? Healthy children that can grow up and exhibit these kinds of leaves, okay? And because they all have roots of faith, therapy, jobs, access to health care, not being evicted, affordable housing, all of these things. And then what leaves would we observe in those children? Love, peace, joy, health, well-being, prosperity. Because again, in some healthy kids, they lead to healthy adults, healthy communities, healthy workforce, healthy everything. If we get it right on the front end, it's a lot easier to get right across a life course. So with that, I just want to thank you for being here. Thank you for taking so much time. This room is packed. And the third day of a conference, I'd be out exploring like Milwaukee and the weather, it's so beautiful. But thank you for being here. And I know that I was not the star of this show, and I know my friend and colleague, Jerry Milner, is. So we're going to get into the business of inviting him up. But before I ask him to join me up here, I would like to show a short video. Thanks very much. It is. It is my distinct pleasure to also award Jerry Milner with the Ann Cone Donnelly Child Abuse Prevention Leadership Award, which is really given to an individual who has exhibited tremendous leadership efforts in or on behalf of children and families. And if that is not just the most compelling way of just inviting you up here, thank you for being the leader you are. Thank you for being the friend and colleague that you are. And thank you for being what you are to all children and families. Jerry, please join me. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Well, I'm overwhelmed. Not so much with the award, but with Melissa. I'm so proud for all of you for having Melissa Merrick at the helm of your work here. You could not be more fortunate to have someone with her level of inspiration and her commitment to action. So I would encourage you all to buckle up for a ride. And just for the record, Melissa, anytime you and I are together, you will always be the star of the show. We can reimagine a different child welfare system. If I didn't think we could reimagine a child welfare system, would not have devoted the last 2.5 years of my life to promoting that message. For the last 2.5 years, my colleague David Kelly here and I, and for a few of those months, Melissa Merrick and our team at the Children's Bureau have made it our mission to promote the idea of preventing child abuse and neglect in the child welfare system. We have traveled the country from coast to coast multiple times. We visited with so many of you. We have tried to understand the good work that you're doing and to shed light on your programs. Because to be quite honest, in child welfare, a field that I have now been fortunate and sometimes pained to serve in for over 40 years now, we have not been about the business of primary prevention of child abuse and neglect. As Melissa has made reference, we have been about the business of preventing things from happening again, which often falls into other categories of prevention after the trauma has occurred in the lives of so many children and families. As we have promoted this notion of primary prevention, which is more than a notion, I should say, we're always careful to say prevention is much more than any single piece of legislation that's out there. It's a philosophy. It's a commitment. It's a way of doing our work. It's a commitment to respecting families. As Keith has said, relationships, whether it's relationships with other organizations or our relationship with the children and the families that we serve. It's a commitment to kindness, which we don't always exhibit. And it's a commitment to the power of community. I'm fortunate that I get to be a messenger of such an incredible vision and direction for our child welfare system. But all of you in the room, and I understand this clearly, have been carrying that message for a very long time. Many of you, maybe longer than I have, I don't know. Prevention is our priority in the Children's Bureau. It's our commitment. But we understand that the message is a shared value among all of us. Our commitment to prevention is reinforced every single week of every single month when we sit down with parents who have been a part of the child welfare system, with young adults who've been in the foster care system and have emancipated, And when we listen to their voices on what child welfare has done for or to them. We recently sat down with a group, probably a dozen or so young adults who had been in foster care, some for many, many years, and most of them had emancipated, some without any permanency in their lives. We went around a big room where they were introducing themselves to us. It struck me immediately that they defined themselves by the number of placements they had been in and how many years they'd spent in our foster care system. One young man said, "My name is Josh. I was in foster care for 18 years, and I was in 18 different placements." Young woman said, "My name is Katie. I was in foster care for 17 years and 17 different placements." David said, "I was in foster care for 17 years, and I had 21 different placements, all the different kinds of placements you can imagine." We got all the way around the room. The last young woman at the table said, "My name is Shay. I was in foster care for 18 years, and I was in 45 different placements." I told that story at another meeting within the last couple of weeks, and a young woman came up to me afterwards, very emotional, and thanking me for sharing that message. She said, "I was in foster care for 12 years, and I was in 88 different placements." I want to say, as a social worker, as somebody who believes in prevention, that should shock the hell out of me. It does not, because I know those people, and I have carried many of those individuals in a caseload myself. And I know that it's not ancient history in our child welfare system. It still happens. And while many of those young adults in that room that day had the resiliency, had the strength, had the protective capacities that Melissa referred to rise above those incredible losses and adversities in their lives, and not only to function in a world that is incredibly challenging to them, but to be advocates for other kids. But just as they were able to do that, so many more, whose names I also know, have not been able to do that. They struggle with homelessness. They struggle with poverty. They struggle to get out of debt. They struggle to begin and complete an education that will give them the opportunities that they so desperately want, all because of the experiences that they've had, mostly under our charge and under our care. I find that unacceptable. It is not an acceptable way to protect children, to protect families in our system. We've come in our child welfare system very far down a path that I'll just say worries me a whole lot. We've come down a path of thinking that the only way we can serve children and parents, even in our prevention environment, is with evidence-based services that have 1, 2, 3 randomized controlled trials behind them, so that we can have confidence that it's going to work with the family. And I believe we need many of those services. I've been out in the field where I've seen the power of evidence-based home visiting, and it is a wonderful thing for those families. But I'm going to tell you with complete conviction that in so many situations, in so many of the families that I come into contact with every month, true primary prevention can be as simple as a community surrounding families with kindness, with respect, with basic supports, with not allowing us to conflate poverty with neglect, which is what we do when we bring 60% of the children in our country into foster care due to neglect, not horrific physical or sexual abuse. We can embark on that kind of a community-based prevention approach, which for me, forgive me for getting a bit personal, is both personal and professional. I've known that level of kindness in the community where I grew up. Although never experiencing the kinds of experiences that so many of those young people had around that table, and so many others that I know, due to circumstances beyond my control, I was still, like them, forced to be on my own long before I was ready. And the community that I lived in reacted with kindness and support. So many of them were there when my parents died, when I chronically ran away from school and all the other sources of pain, when I needed help fixing a leaky roof as a teenager. There was a community there. There were people who showed up, absent those kindnesses, those kind people. I can tell you my life would be a lot different, and I probably would not be standing up here with you today. But our families and our children in the child welfare system have not always known that kind of kindness, that kind of support. I know that because we ask them. We ask them, what are the words that you would use to describe your experience in child welfare? And they are not kind words that they give to us. What they do know is loss, anger, frustration, hopelessness, without feeling connected and valued. They often know clinical interventions that are designed to fix their troubling life circumstances that an old man up the road or neighbor across the street or a member of the community might have been able to help them avert. Instead of nurturing those kinds of fundamental supports, we often pathologize the very vulnerability that our families experience and wait until it becomes so tragic and so dire that our only recourse is to fix rather than prevent. Our families often do not know the power of a caring community, the healing that can come from feeling valued and worthy of kindness. As people who care about other people, we have to move with haste and with urgency to create a family well-being system, not a child welfare system as we currently know it, that's set up to prevent trauma, to build the resilience of parents and children, and to enable them to thrive, as the video says, even in the face of inevitable adversity. We have the power to do that. We have that power in this room. We have the power to change programs and policies and, good Lord, funding. We have the power to change lives. Prevention has many faces. I believe it works best when it shows up in the faces of people who know us and care about us. I believe it works best when it's present in the communities where we live. And I believe it works best when it's delivered with kindness. I thank you for your kindness in sharing this with me, even though I am not the person deserving of this. But I also thank you for letting me be a part of your journey, your amazing journey, to turn our human service system into one that values families through prevention of child abuse and neglect. Thank you so much.
Okay. Am I back on? Yes. Thanks. It's like a teeth. So we are now in the fireside chat portion of the plenary, and unlike some of the other speakers, we decided we're just gonna wing it. We didn't want to have a question answer. We wanted to just chat. I think some of the most powerful messages sometimes come up just observing natural relationships and conversations. I think there are many things that Jerry and I see in alignment. I think there are probably lots of other things that maybe we disagree. I don't know, but we're going to be talking about moving upstream. We're going to be talking about primary prevention. We're going to be talking about all these awesome topics. Yeah. So go.
So go and talk about it. I think we have, are you able to hear me okay? Yeah, we say this all the time when David or I are out on the road. We have a moment. We have momentum at this point in time that's driven not so much by individuals, but by our collective commitment to what we can do on behalf of children and families. And I think the thing that just feels so urgent to us right now is to take advantage of this moment, to build on what we have learned, what you have learned, what you demonstrate every single day out there in your programs, and what your children, your youth, and your families tell us about what works for them. We have an incredible opportunity right now, and just to be able to be in a room with 1,000 people whose lives are devoted to preventing child abuse and neglect is the best evidence, quite honestly, that I think I ever need of that.
I agree. I could not agree more. It has been such a humbling experience for me to be here at the helm of this awesome organization and to meet so many people. I've been able to meet like the mother and grandmother of Healthy Families America. I've been able to meet a curator of a museum, and really see all the synergy. I agree with you, Jerry. It's like the moment is now to be bold, to be vocal, to do things different for our kids and families. And it's just really energizing to be in a space like this, but to be with these messages and these calls for action. It's thrilling.
Yeah, and I think part of the temptation is to look around and find the barriers to doing the kind of work that's so essential. Working for the federal government, I can tell you, there's a lot of barriers.
There are barriers.
And I don't have to look for them. They kind of come looking for me more often than not. And I'm guilty all the time of blaming the rigidity in our funding system, our federal funding system, for not supporting primary prevention. And while I've got your attention, I'll blame that again right now, because we need that flexibility. We need not to have our biggest pot of money that we have to support child welfare designated specifically to pay somebody else to care for children rather than strengthening families. That is crucial. I also, when I'm speaking to groups like this, I hear barriers like, we are just so busy doing what we're doing in the Child Welfare Agency. How in the world do you expect us to do prevention on top of that?
Right.
You know what the response to that is. I don't expect you to do it on top of it. I expect you to do it instead of, or instead of a large portion of that.
Yeah.
We look for those barriers, and yet I go to your programs out there. Sally, I visited with Sally in Tuscaloosa. I visited with healthy families down in South Carolina. I'm thinking of the most recent things, the last just few weeks here. And I've seen firsthand the kind of work that, in spite of those barriers, can be done, and how effective that is in meeting the needs of children and families. That gives me tremendous hope.
Yeah, it's really a culture shift.
Yeah.
It's about a reframe, and I hear it too. Well, my waiting list is out the door for treatment, so how can I put any staff or energy or funding toward prevention? And it's like, yes, however, that's going to continue to grow if we never do things different,
Right.
And so it is around figuring out, not the best, the perfect evidence, but when something has enough evidence. And I think there are different types of evidence, frankly. There's RCT, rigorous scientific evidence, but there's observational evidence, there's, qualitative data and analyses. And I think what you say, it's very powerful that these things are delivered with kindness, with empathy, with giving each other the benefit of the doubt, not name calling and blaming, and just working together to support all children. Not just my children deserve kindness and empathy.
Right.
All of our children and all of our communities
Sure.
deserve that kind of kind response.
And I would say that the parents deserve that same level
Yes.
of kindness and empathy. I'm so glad, Melissa, that you mentioned a culture change, because moving, as I said a few minutes ago, moving to prevention isn't just about implementing a piece of legislation. It's about a philosophy. It's about a value system. It's about a commitment. And I think one of the biggest barriers, certainly one of the biggest ones that I see, is a culture that is so intent on rescuing children from, quote, bad parents, that we can't see the missed opportunities, the goodness, and the critical importance of parent-child relationships out there. I will be the first to say there are some kids who cannot remain with their families. That is a given in my experience. But I don't think that's the most typical situation out there. And to move to a culture that values parents and is willing to invest in building, strengthening the protective capacities of those parents will be one of the biggest shifts, I think, that we have an opportunity to make.
I could not agree more, and it gives us an opportunity for true dual generation primary prevention. We know that a lot of our parents have experienced extreme adversity and child abuse and neglect and other experiences themselves. And we know, again, the data, a long history of robust literature about that makes it more likely that their kids will also experience that kind of adversity. So why not talk to parents, understand their needs, and that way we get ahead of this, passing on of this kind of adversity.
David and I meet all the time with legal judicial organizations and groups, and we meet with judges, and we meet with attorneys who represent children and parents. And one of the things I think, I won't speak so much for David, I'll speak just for me. I see kind of a boilerplate approach to how, particularly when families become involved in our child protection agencies and in our court system, that doesn't take into account what do they really need. And we don't always ask them or the young people, what is it that you need? We make an assumption that we know best. And that we will design their case plans. We will set their visitation schedule. We will put the orders in place. We will designate what the services are. And then when they don't work and families are unable to take advantage of them, we blame the parents for that, and we use that against them to further traumatize the families. We got to get away from that.
Yeah, and we have to integrate this community voice
Yes.
and lived experience of our families, of our communities. They know their challenges, but they also are well aware of their assets,
Yeah.
about what's going well, what are the strengths in the community,
Yeah.
that then we can design programs to really harness and
Yeah.
strengthen and match and coordinate, in this trauma-informed way. I have to say, this trauma-informed buzz is like, come on, guys. Trauma-informed is not just treatment and not just after the fact. We need trauma-informed systems. We need coordinated primary prevention efforts based on what we know about trauma and the toll that trauma exacts on our young people.
Yeah, and I am so glad you brought up the whole community-based thing, because when we're talking particularly in child welfare, the elephant in the room is the absolute incredible overrepresentation of so many children and families of color in our system. And we spend a lot of time talking about how do we deal with that, how can we be more culturally appropriate in our ways. And okay, I'm not going to say that's not an important approach to take, but at the heart of it, our children, our families come from communities. I know that we have many very, very diverse communities, but I also know that as often as not, if not more times than not, communities have the power, communities have the knowledge, communities have the insight, the understanding for how to give their families, their children, the kinds of supports, the kind of strength, the kinds of resilience that they need to deal with a background of trauma that may go back for generations, and to support the strengthening of families in accordance with what their backgrounds are, what their cultures are, what their languages are. And even with that knowledge so close at hand, we choose not to use the power of those communities. We take children out of those communities. We place them oftentimes very far away from those people who understand them and can help them. And I think that any discussion that we have around disparity, disproportionality, has to begin with a discussion around the power of community.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that. And the power of the fact that it's not a one-size-fits-all. It's not that, the same program or it's going to look the same in different communities, because as you say, we have different stakeholders, different champions, different assets, different challenges, different barriers in each community, which is why it's really nice, these kinds of collective impact approaches that are going on, because they really leverage where the power is in various communities. So I would get questions, well, Melissa, if I can only choose one partner, who would it be? Would it be a business partner? Would it be a community partner? Would it be a faith partner? It's it doesn't work that way, guys. It's who are the key stakeholders in your communities? Who are the powerful people in your cities, et cetera? And what's the backdrop, right? What's the political landscape? What are the it gets really complex quickly, but it's not a one-size-fits-all.
No.
And we must listen to communities.
And I think we overthink it. A couple of things that I hear all the time when we're talking to different groups. They'll say, we don't have enough of this kind of service out there, so we really just can't do any better. I hear this all the time, and maybe I'm attuned to it because I come from such a rural part of Alabama. We are in a rural area, and we have no services, therefore we can't do this. I don't buy that. I don't buy it for 1 second, because there is not a county or community out there that doesn't have some combination of school, a public health department, churches, some kind of civic group, any number of community structures that could come together in a way that offers support and strength to children, to young adults, to families. In my own experience, there were no services in Tallapoosa County, Alabama. There were no services. There were no formal kinds of services. And I didn't need those kinds of services. But I did need to have that informal community support service that was there. And as I travel, and David and I travel around all over the country, we see that happening right now. We've been out now twice to Nebraska, where we've been able to see in a couple of different communities those kinds of organizations coming together and figuring out how each one of them can contribute to the overall well-being of children, of families, of parents in those communities. Law enforcement being at the table when we're looking at ways to provide fundamental supports. That is not an insurmountable task for us. It does take some creativity, it takes some imagination, but mostly it just takes a commitment and a vision that we want our families to be able to thrive.
Yeah, absolutely. And that said, though, I do think that there are things with our commitment and through partnership that we can do at the national level, certainly, to help get more resources for communities, to not make it so difficult for communities to be creative and to blend, the small kind of services and gathering spaces that they have.
Right.
So I don't want folks to hear you say that we don't need any more funding for McVie or CB dollars or whatever.
Just
and
to
I know
be
that's
clear,
not what you're
I'm
saying.
not saying that,
I know
no.
that's not what you're saying. So I just think, it is about, lifting up what's working organically, but really requiring ourselves to get business champions or insurance company dollars or other things, really help people understand why they need to care about community well-being and community prevention strategies, to really, again, assure that we have kind of a brighter future for all of our kids.
Absolutely.
We have only a few minutes left, so I want you to have the opportunity to say anything else that you haven't said.
Well, I pretty much said it. If I haven't said it, you've said it, and I agree with it. Everything that you said. I think we have a point in time now where collectively we're able to share a vision. In my years of working in child welfare, it's the first time that I've really been able to see powerful organizations like yours, the private philanthropic community in our country, state leadership, and federal government leadership begin to converge on what we really think is important in terms of what our mission is. And to get down to what you talked about, Melissa, in your keynote, the root causes of so many of the issues that we run circles around every day trying to fix, rather than trying to get down to what is creating those conditions that prohibit or inhibit children and parents from thriving. We have that opportunity right now, and if we don't capitalize on that, if we don't take advantage on that, if we don't advocate for that kind of a system, which does include not only more funding, but flexibility in the current funding that we already have, then I don't think we're doing our job. I think we have to do that. It's going to take all of you and a few thousand more out there to drive this point home. But we have to demonstrate for the rest of the country what we can do, what you can do with your programs, how families can be better off if they have the fundamental supports that they need. If every young parent out there who doesn't know how to raise a baby but finds herself having to raise a baby without all of the supports, all of the family that she needs there, if every one of those had access to a home visiting program, we've seen firsthand how that can begin to break those intergenerational cycles right there in that moment by giving those parents the kinds of supports that they need. We need to push that agenda forward with all haste and all urgency.
I could not agree more. And to use what you said, it's an exciting time. Buckle up. Let's go. Let's do it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
It's wonderful. Thank
So
you so
good.
much. Yeah.
Well, if that didn't renew your commitment to the work that you do, powerful words. Thank you both for being here. This sort of wraps up our last plenary session, but I'd be remiss before we excused everyone to give a couple of thank yous to some folks who haven't necessarily jumped up on the stage, but have been instrumental in helping put together the program, do the behind-the-scenes work. And so I just want to recognize a few of our staff sitting right up here in front: Catherine Murphy, Olivia Padilla, Chuck Mutcheller, and our very own retired, but he's not going very far, Buddy Allen. So thank you all for your help. Really quickly, do we have our lifetime board member Sue Ellen Freed in the audience? I do see her. Sue Ellen, could you stand for a moment? So as you might all remember, on the first day, I had mentioned Sue Ellen Freed as being instrumental in introducing us to How Change Happens, Leslie Crutchfield, and today happens to be Sue Ellen's 87th birthday. And so in lieu of all of us singing happy birthday, which would be over in a short period of time, I do ask you, if you see Sue Ellen, to go up and in the true spirit of the power of kindness, to give Sue Ellen a hug and say happy birthday to her. She's accomplished more in her lifetime than we could possibly imagine, and we thank you for all the work that you've done for Prevent Child Abuse America, Sue Ellen. Just a quick reminder, if you're still interested, you can go to the registration booth to sign up for the Evicted exhibit. Kendra Shacken, please come see me after we're done here and collect your $20 Starbucks gift card. And just a really quick thank you to everyone for being here. I realize the commitment that it takes to come here, to attend the sessions, but thank you for all that you can do, and I hope that you've left as inspired as I am. So thank you.